Before the Battle of Chickamauga in 1863, the Union Army of Cumberland had a total of 58,000 troops, and the Confederate Army of Tennessee had a total of 63,000. For the Confederate Army of Tennessee, they had two major generals. One of these major generals was Lieutenant General James Longstreet. Lieutenant James Longstreet was born on January 8, 1821, in Edgefield District, South Carolina. He died in Gainesville, Georgia, January 2, 1904. He was one of the foremost Confederate generals of the American Civil War, and his tactics used in the Battle of Chickamauga are later to be found used by the German Tank Division in World War II. One of his amazing moves that he made in the Battle of Chickamauga was when General Rosecrans created a gap in his lines. Longstreet was the personal general who punched through an opportunity in this line. And if it weren't for later Bragg's commands for him not to pursue and keep hammering General George H. Thomas's lines, General James Longstreet would have most likely succeeded in pursuing Thomas's unit. Another notable general in the Union Army during the Battle of Chickamauga is General William S. Rosecrans. William S. Rosecrans was born at Little Taylor Run, Ohio, on September 6, 1819. Sadly, he died on March 11, 1898. When William S. Rosecrans was at West Point University, he graduated ranking 5th in his class of 56 students. Later, before the war, he started an oil refining company in Cincinnati, Ohio. Not only did the Confederate Army have great generals, but so did the Union. One of these great generals is George H. Thomas. George Henry Thomas was born on July 31, 1816 in Newsoms Depot, Virginia. George H. Thomas died on March 28, 1817. When George was only 14, his father died. Another interesting fact about George H. Thomas is that he saved some families from a slave revolt that was started by Ned Turner in Virginia. Like Braxton Bragg, George H. Thomas studied at West Point University. Unlike Braxton Bragg, George H. Thomas fought in the Seminole War and the Mexican War, besides the Civil War. George H. Thomas also got the nickname the Rock of Chickamauga because of his amazing bravery and strategic abilities when he was being pounded on by Longstreet's division. Another famous general in the Battle of Chickamauga was Braxton Bragg. Braxton Bragg was born on March 22, 1817 in Warrenton, North Carolina. Braxton Bragg died on September 27, 1876 in Galveston, Texas. One of Braxton Bragg's accomplishments was winning the Battle of Chickamauga, but sadly he failed in two other major campaigns. A fact about Braxton Bragg is that not one soldier or other general liked him in the army. Braxton Bragg was also looked at as one of the most controversial generals in the whole Confederate Army. Braxton Bragg studied at West Point University in his youth, and when he was studying at West Point University, he studied becoming an artillery officer, but once the Civil War came, he just became a general. Even though the Confederates suffered a heavy toll, the Union troops still had casualties. The Union troops suffered 1,657 dead, 9,756 wounded, and 4,757 missing, and a total of 16,170 casualties out of 58,000 troops.
Johnny Clem was one of the most courageous kids that ever stepped foot on U.S. soil. When he was 9 years old, he ran away from home to join the Army in 1861. He was turned down, but found the 22nd Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry. He was eventually adopted as a mascot and drummer boy. Because he was too young, he did not get a salary until 1863. The officers all took money from their salaries and gave it to them. On September 20th, 1863, many of the 22nds were captured, but Johnny escaped when a rebel officer tried to capture him. He picked up a rifle and shot the officer. General George H. Thomas promoted Johnny to Lance Corporal.
In the end, the Confederates won, but they did not go down without a price to pay. The Confederate lost 2,312 men died, 14,674 men wounded, which probably later will die, and 1,468 men missing, and for a total of 18,545 casualties out of 63,000 troops.
After the Tullahoma campaign, Rosecrans decided to force the Confederates out of Chattanooga. Rosecrans spread the three parts of his army out to take different routes into Chattanooga. Rosecrans united his forces that were scattered throughout Tennessee and Georgia and forced the Confederates south. Now, Bragg was determined to take back Chattanooga. The Union followed them and had a small fight at Davis's Crossroads. On September 17, 1863, Bragg had set out to meet with part of Rosecrans' army, defeat them, and then move back into Chattanooga. On the 18th, Bragg's men had fought with Union soldiers and had a great disadvantage because the Union soldiers were equipped with Spencer's repeating rifle. The real fighting started the next morning when Bragg's army began to hammer the enemies, but they could not break through the enemy lines. Late in the morning, Bragg was told that he had a 1/4 mile gap in his army. As he was filling it, Rosecrans created one, and James Longstreet's men had definitely used it to their advantage. Bragg had forced 1/3 of the army out of the battle, including Rosecrans. Rosecrans retired his men back to the city and left the field to Bragg. Now Bragg had control around the city, but not in it. The Confederates had won this battle.